Unit 6, Chapter 7 in your book, Section 3. We already did Section 1 with the Me Group book assignment, and then Section 2 with the reading assignment that you should have already finished up. And we're going to talk a little bit more about nationalism. And the reason why it matters is after the War of 1812, there was a new sense of pride and identity of Americans, mainly because the United States won a pretty significant war against Britain and kind of showed the world that not only are they a huge military power, but now they're going to start to become the foremost agricultural power and also a power in industry in the Northeast. So with those two combined, agriculture of the South, agriculture of the Midwest, the industrialism of the Northeast, and also the new networks of canals, roads, train lines is going to be massively, massively important. So this is where we kind of stand during this early 1800s era. You can see that the United States in red is growing massively, especially with Lewis and Clark edition under President Jefferson. We also see that Mexico gained its independence from Spain. You can also see that Cuba, down in the South and in the Caribbean area, is also focusing on their revolution very, very soon as well. And you can kind of see how big the Mexico was at a time, and that's going to come to a head here pretty soon between the United States and Mexico. The population density is also going to change massively. You can see that the population change is mainly focused on some major cities are starting to grow. And you look over here in the 1820s, you see New Orleans in the South, Atlanta, Nashville, Louisville, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh. All of these cities are going to be major industrial cities, mainly because they lie along a river or close to the coast. And the South will still remain a huge agricultural power. That's why we still don't see a lot of major cities in this region, is because of agriculture, and then cities were just not booming. And this green circled area is where you're going to start to see what we call a megapolis start to grow, where you have cities like Boston, New York, parts of New Jersey. You're starting to get into Washington, D.C., and Baltimore. This region right here is just going to grow massively over the next 100 years and become the most densely populated area in the nation. So our next president is James Monroe. Now, James Monroe wins in a massive landslide as our fifth president, and you could see that we added some new states in this time period. You have Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. You can see that Indiana has a very small population, only being 3 electoral votes. And most of the people live right along the Ohio River, right along here. And a lot of people thought this would be the main area of Indiana for many, many years to come, especially Madison, Indiana, which is right on the river where Hanover College is. But as time grows and people start to travel, people start to move into the northern part of the state because of the Great Lakes. And if you're on the Great Lakes, you can eventually connect right over here to the Erie Canal, which connect to the Hudson River, which connects right here to New York City. So how does James Monroe kind of change some things? Well, there's going to be some nationalist economic policies. Remember, nationalist means that there's going to be rules that change for the whole nation as opposed to state policies. Now, prior to the War of 1812, Democratic Republicans did not support big government. They did not want to see a lot of national laws. But they passed a law called the Tariff of 1816, the same year Indiana became a state, and this used federal power to help industrialists. Remember, a tariff is a tax on imported goods. So if a foreign nation wants to sell goods inside the United States, they have to pay a tariff, which is free money for the U.S., and also it makes their products more expensive. Thus, in turn, if the foreign product is more expensive, the American product is cheaper. People buy American products, helps keep American jobs and American industries running. So Henry Clay is going to be one of the more forefront guys. This is a guy that is really wanting to create a network of systems, you could say, to connect the South, the Midwest, and the Northeast. So first, he supported tariffs that protected American industry to make those foreign products way too expensive, but also wanted to build more roads and canals to link the East Coast and Midwest. And this is what we call the American system. And the thought was the North and the South would connect more, and it really turned out that the Northeast and the Midwest started to connect more so than the South. And that's going to become a huge tenet for the Civil War, and we'll get to that later. When the National Bank starts to flex its muscles, remember the National Bank was designed by Alexander Hamilton in order to create one common currency and also to move it further south to help support farmers. Well, they actually start to create a law that levies a tax on national banks, but John Marshall and the Supreme Court struck down the law. So that obviously shows the power of the Supreme Court as well and their power of judicial review. So when we talk about, sorry about this, I'm going to kind of squeeze through here, this part. When we talk about the changing American landscape, one of the things that starts to flourish is American art. New territories like Florida, Arkansas, and Missouri start to change, and people really start to appreciate the landscape of the United States. And these are some of the more popular paintings that were done during this time period. A lot of scapes with mountains and trees, rivers, oceans, lakes, to kind of show how different the Northeast and the coastal was compared to the inner parts of the United States. It also shows and highlights pioneer life, people moving into the Ohio region, Northwest Territory, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, those regions as well. And here's a painting of Niagara Falls, which is near Buffalo also. One of the most important treaties that the United States signs is called the Adams-Onis Treaty. Adams-Onis is basically saying we are going to have Florida. It would be ceded by Spain. Mexico did not want any part of it. Mexico, when they left Spain, they did not seek Florida, and primarily because this is not a region that they were familiar with. And what the United States saw this as a benefit is when they are sailing out of New Orleans, they can use this entire coastline as ports in order to sail all the way through up into the East Coast as well. So Florida becomes part of the United States with this treaty. That's the main point. All right, so the Missouri Compromise is a big, big deal. Henry Clay, the guy who said he wanted to build roads and canals to help support business and agriculture, is also the crafter of the Missouri Compromise. So here's the problem. Missouri would enter as a slave or free state. That's the big, big concern. Now, when we think about these concerns, northern states are going to say, well, if Missouri enters as a slave state, that's less votes for northern states in Congress. And also, it also means there are going to be more votes geared towards agriculture as to more votes geared towards industry. Northern states were supportive of tariffs because it made foreign products more expensive, and those are the states that sell and industrialize goods. All right, they make tables, they make art, they make all these different products that they are in competition with Britain and France and other nations. The southern states actually purchase a lot of those goods. They purchase different types of farming equipment that is very, very expensive, but they don't like tariffs. They want to see the tariffs go away so they can buy products a little bit more, and foreign countries can buy agricultural products as well. They're also concerned that another northern state would have a vote as well. So here's kind of what they decided to do. You see in green, the green states have freedom. They are free states, no slaves in those areas, even though there were slaves. New York, Pennsylvania had a lot of slaves, hundreds of thousands illegally. But the Missouri Compromise is going to allow Missouri to enter as a slave state. Maine will enter as a free state, no longer Massachusetts. But also the caveat is this. This line, this parallel, will always, 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 from here on out, anything south of it will become a slave state. So Louisiana and Texas eventually will become slave states. And then we'll talk about these territories a little bit later. And anything north of it will become a free state. Massively important. The only state north of this line from here on out would be Missouri. These are older states, so we don't concern ourselves with that. So anything above the line, free. Anything below, slave. And that's the Missouri Compromise. It's going to cause major problems, major, major problems, especially in these areas, Kansas and Nebraska. Kansas and Nebraska are going to have all-out wars about this region on whether to be free or slave. So when we take a look at this quote, this momentous question, which is the Missouri Compromise, like a fire bell in the night, awakened and filled me with terror. I considered it at once the death knell of the Union. So what Thomas Jefferson is saying is that the Missouri Compromise is basically the beginning of the end of a united nations. So when we talk about the precursors to the Civil War, this is definitely one of them. The Union will be destroyed. All right, you will start to see that northern states and southern states are going to battle it out between who has supremacy. So here are the results, and this will be the last slide that you have to listen to. The Missouri Compromise line is drawn to separate free and slave territories. Here's what the North gets. They get Maine as a free state. They are upset that slavery extends further west. And they are asked to remain silent by the South. The South, Missouri enters as a free state, but they felt insulted by the North, and they blamed the Missouri Compromise for more slave revolts. And that's where we'll end.